Going backstage was always wonderful. You felt such an air of excitement. I'm going to escape. I'm going to get out of here. I could go much further.
Lee Radziwill, a name often whispered in the same breath as her iconic sister Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. But Lee was more than just Jackie O's little sister. She was a free spirit, a fashion icon, a socialite with a global footprint, and a woman of her own remarkable achievements. While Jackie captivated the world as the wife of President John F. Kennedy, Lee carved her own path. She was a muse to artists, a patron of the arts, and a woman whose elegance graced countless best-dressed lists. Yet her accomplishments often resided in the shadow of her more famous sister. So buckle up and prepare to step out of Jackie's shadow and into the fascinating world of Lee Radziwill. Early childhood. Caroline Lee Bouvier came into this world on March 1, 1933, in New York City's Doctors Hospital. A stockbroker named Jack Bouvier III and a socialite named Janet Norton Lee were her parents. One strange thing about her was that people called her Lee instead of her initial name from the moment she was born, and it stuck. Growing up, she lived with her older sister Jacqueline, who would go on to marry John F. Kennedy, the future president. As a child, Lee lived on Park Avenue, and during the summers, she and her family would escape to the Hamptons to escape the noise and chaos of New York City. Lee attended a number of excellent secondary schools throughout her childhood. Thus, her education was unaffected by the transition to college. In addition to New York City's The Chapin School, she went to Washington, D.C.'s Potomac School and Farmington, Connecticut's Miss Porter's School. After much deliberation, she decided to spend her sophomore year studying art in Italy before completing her undergraduate degree at the esteemed Sarah Lawrence College. A famous Wall Street figure known as Black Jack was Lee's father. His inability to control his drinking and his affairs led to the family's eventual breakup when she was a small girl. Despite this, they were still considered members of New York's royal family and enjoyed substantial influence and connections within the city's elite. The sisters stayed with their mother, who remarried to Hugh Auchincloss. The latter kindly invited them to his Virginia mansion, and their father chose to remain unmarried. Jacqueline was Hugh's third and last marriage. He had wed twice before her mother. Even though they were geographically separated, the sisters maintained contact with Jack. However, Lee had the impression that their father gave Jacqueline more attention than herself, and she even harbored some jealousy toward her. Being more than 4 years her senior, her sister frequently stole the show. Teachers lauded Jacqueline for being more bright academically, and their father adored her. The girl's mother had 2 more half-siblings and 3 step-siblings from Hugh's prior marriages as a result of their mother's second marriage. Lee made her social debut after finishing college and living in high society for a while. Her stunning full-page portrait appeared in the December 25, 1950 issue of Life magazine on page 71 of the debutante section. Lee wasn't a one-man woman. Romantic relationships. The 3-strike rule was something that Lee took to heart when it came to selecting the proper man to go into a relationship with. On the 18th of April in 1953, when she was as young as 21 years old, she tied the knot with a publishing executive by the name of Michael Temple Canfield. This was her first marriage. The fantasy that she had always dreamed of was finally realized when her biological father had the honor of bringing her down the aisle to say her wedding vows. This was the moment that she would never forget. Michael was everything that Lee desired at the moment. He was gorgeous, clever, privileged, connected, and most importantly, he provided a chance for her to escape her mother's control. Immediately following their wedding, the couple moved into a beautiful house in Chester Square, which is located in London. During that time, they experienced a honeymoon phase that was unlike any other. He showered her with all the love that he could muster, and for a period of time, it was like something out of a fairy tale. Unfortunately, despite the fact that he was the head of Harper & Brothers, had a very erudite upbringing, and had an amazing portfolio as an editor, Michael was a heavy drinker. One day, he collapsed inside his room, unconscious. Upon regaining consciousness, this event served as a kind of wake-up call for him, prompting him to make an effort to rescue himself and possibly even his marriage. Even if he made an effort to quit, it never seemed to last very long. Stanislaw Albrecht Radziwill, a Polish-Lithuanian prince, was the person who Lee discovered and fell in love with during the time that her marriage was falling apart. Jacqueline had already met John F. Kennedy and had tied the knot with him at this point in time. By interfering and pulling some strings, the Kennedys were able to make it possible for Lee to marry Prince Stanislaw. They were successful in their petitions to the Pope and the Vatican, which sought to have the marriage between Lee and Michael dissolved. Therefore, on March 19, 1959, Lee tied the knot for the second time, this time with a genuine royal. The fact that this was the case was extremely amusing, considering that there were rumors that Prince George, the Duke of Kent, might have been the biological father of Michael Canfield. If this had been the case, then he would have been a real prince as well. As we move forward, Prince Stanislaw and Lee were blessed with 2 children throughout their marriage. Their names are Anthony and Christina. As evidence that royalty does, in fact, attract royalty, the family resided in a mansion that was located in close proximity to Buckingham Palace. The rumor mill was ablaze with a variety of hypotheses surrounding the reasons behind the dissolution of their marriage, which would eventually come to an end. As a result of Prince Stanislaw's multiple extramarital affairs and Lee's growing connection with Greek shipping tycoon Aristotle Onassis, who would later become her brother-in-law, the marriage came to an end. This was the common thread that was shared by a number of different sources. Allegedly, she was also engaging in a connection with photographer Peter Beard, and the combination of all of these reasons ultimately led to the couple's divorce in 1974. In 1988, Lee made the decision to wed director Herbert Ross, which was a final gamble on love. Instead of marrying a member of the aristocracy or royalty, Lee chose to marry Herbert Ross. Herbert was a director that was popular and important throughout his time period. He directed films such as Steel Magnolias, Play It Again, Sam and the Goodbye Girl, which were all huge hits. The celebration of their marriage took place in her apartment on Fifth Avenue, and shortly after the wedding there was a special luncheon held at Jackie Kennedy's home in New York City. The marriage, on the other hand, did not continue forever either, as they eventually divorced when the year 2001 rolled around. In her confession, Lee admitted that Herbert was unlike any other person she had ever been emotionally associated with. In addition, she disclosed that the film industry, despite the fact that it first appeared to be an exciting field, was actually not, and that she loathed Hollywood and the narrow-mindedness of the business. Without a doubt, Jacqueline, Lee's sister, was the person who remained by her side for the longest period of time. Therefore, it is time that we delve into the nature of their relationship. Lee was very close to her sister. Through the years, Lee maintained a strong bond with her sister, despite the fact that she was never able to live up to her sister's expectations. When they were adults, their relationship was especially strong before and throughout Jacqueline's time as the First Lady of the United States. They did a lot of activities together, such as celebrating holidays and getting together with relatives, going to state occasions together, going to the White House, hosting the Kennedys at their home in London, and most memorably, going on a month-long vacation to Italy, India, and Pakistan in 1962. Although Lee Kennedy had been known by her middle name throughout her whole childhood, the Kennedys chose to give their firstborn child the name Caroline, which was also Lee's initial name. This helped reinforce the family links that they shared. Additionally, Lee's daughter, Anna Christina Radziwill, whom she had carried with Prince Stanislaw, had received a blessing from President John F. Kennedy himself. Unfortunately, everything started to change once the president was murdered in 1963, which was a tragic and historically significant event. After learning about the tragedy, Lee made a hasty trip from her residence in London to Washington, District of Columbia, in order to provide her sister with the much-required empathy and moral support that she needed at that time. She was a visible rock for Jacqueline as she brought the coffin of her husband to the Capitol to lie in state, and then to the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle for the funeral. The entire nation watched as she did this. In the end, even Lee was unable to keep her composure, and she burst into tears when the wing of Air Force One was lowered in a gesture of respect during the burial that took place at Arlington National Cemetery. In a later revelation, it was revealed that she had secretly admired Jacqueline's bravery and that she frequently pinned notes on her pillow to demonstrate how much she loved her. Additionally, she supported Jacqueline in surviving the final horrible day before she and her children left the White Mansion and traveled to the Georgetown mansion of diplomat W. Averell Harriman. In addition, Lee provided assistance to Jacqueline during her relocation to New York City, where she was placed in an apartment that was located just a few blocks up Fifth Avenue from an apartment that Lee had recently purchased. Lee's journey into acting. During the 1960s, when the sisters were starting to drift apart, Lee made new creative friends like Rudolph Nureyev, Margot Fonteyn, Cecil Beaton, Truman Capote, and Renzo Mongiardino, an architect and decorator. Lee quickly became one of Truman Capote's swans, a term for his circle of respected female acquaintances. An unusual kinship was shared by Truman and Lee. It didn't matter how well Truman did as a writer. He was certain that the powerful and the beautiful would never welcome him into their salons because he was gay. He shared Lee's sentiments about feeling perpetually ensconced in her older sister's presence. Even though they were clearly in second place, they seemed strangely at ease with each other. It seems that after Jackie's 1968 wedding to Aristotle, Lee, who couldn't understand her sister's callous actions, turned to Truman in tears. To help Lee break out of her sister's perpetual shadow and pursue her own acting career, Truman decided to back her. With professors from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, she began her acting career in 1967. Truman proposed that she star as Tracy Lord, a hedonistic, free-spirited socialite in Philip Barry's comedy, The Philadelphia Story. The public and media paid close attention to her since she was the princess sister of Jacqueline Kennedy. Even though the premiere generated a lot of buzz, the criticism that followed was really appalling, with some critics going so far as to write, "A new star is not born," in the Chicago Tribune, expressing their profound disdain for her acting abilities. Despite the harsh reviews, Lee persisted in her acting. Some reviewers found her performance awkward and amateurish. Producer David Susskind was urged by Truman to put his protégé in a television drama. Gene Tierney, who had earlier brought Lee fame in a comparable role, would star in the 1944 Otto Preminger classic Laura, which was subsequently decided to adapt. With Truman as a co-writer, the show debuted nationally on ABC in January 1968. The critics' opinion of Lee did not undergo a dramatic shift, regrettably. According to Jack Gould, a television critic for the New York Times, she was nothing more than a lovely face from whom no one anticipated outstanding acting skills. Returning to London, Lee realized he had no chance of ever becoming a famous actor. During this time, the bond between Truman and Lee encountered some challenges. Their disagreement stemmed from her refusal to testify in Gore Vidal's libel suit against Truman. After Vidal was expelled from the Kennedy White House for being drunk, Truman asserted in the court that he had done it on purpose. On the other hand, Mr. Vidal asserted that his acquaintances merely escorted him to his hotel following his enmity with Attorney General Robert Kennedy. After losing the case without Lee's testimony, Truman felt pressured to apologize and win over Mr. Vidal. But this wasn't the last straw. Truman's trait as a rat ultimately doomed their friendship. Regarding the intricate dynamics between the sisters and her deepest feelings, Truman divulged all that Lee had confided in him. It was Truman's job to be involved with his many female celebrity acquaintances, gathering as much material as he could for what he hoped would be his greatest work as a writer. Even though he never published the book, he did reveal some pages that contained several closely held secrets. Unfortunately for Lee, this action turned her into a social outcast who nobody wanted to be around. Lee pursued a career as an interior decorator. Lee neglected her ordinarily modest but obvious talent, design and fashion, as she obsessively sought performing. While she was married to her second husband, Lee dabbled in interior design by working with Italian stage designer Lorenzo Mongiardino on the stunning Turville Grange mansion. Notable photographers such as Cecil Beaton and Horst P. Horst were completely captivated by the exquisite interior decorations and frequently photographed the mansions. Lee chose to give design a go after becoming inspired by the sophisticated style she had honed while working with Mongiardino. Her work on the interior design of a house for a couple who would only be visiting a few times a year was fascinating. After finding success with them, she launched her own interior design company in 1976. Among the favorable press she received for her work was a feature spread in Architectural Digest, which landed her a small number of corporate and wealthy private clients. As recognition of her impeccable taste in clothing, Lee was elected to the esteemed Vanity Fair International Best Dressed Hall of Fame in 1996. She owned a residence on Manhattan's 160 East 72nd Street and an apartment on Paris's 49 Avenue Montaigne, demonstrating her immaculate taste in fashion at every level of her life. In the April 2009 issue of Elle Decor, the magazine featured Lee's beautiful houses, offering readers a glimpse of her sophisticated taste in home design. During their February 2013 conversation, Lee and director Sofia Coppola discussed her life. Covering the issue of privacy in modern society, she opened up about her life in an article for the New York Times Style magazine. Lee was once again singled out for praise in 2013 when she was named by The Guardian as one of the 50 most fashionable persons aged 50 and up. Lee's sad death. Giorgio Armani, who counted Lee among his most influential figures, and Lee herself stayed devoted to the fashion industry throughout her life. Lee didn't inherit a large fortune like her sister did, so she had to work hard to maintain her extravagant lifestyle. Her Paris flat and other properties were sold off to merely make ends meet. It is thought that a trust fund her mother had established provided her with financial support. In February 2019, at the age of 85, Lee gently succumbed to natural causes in her New York house. On February 25th, her funeral took place at St. Thomas More in New York City, and many well-known figures from the fashion and artistic industries were in attendance. There were many famous faces in attendance, including Caroline Kennedy, Marc Jacobs, Sofia Coppola, Carolina Herrera, Peter Beard, Andre Leon Talley, Caroline Kennedy, Carol Radziwill, and Marc Jacobs. Her lovable spirit and amusing antics were lauded as a monument to her lasting influence on the fashion and cultural industries. It was said that Lee had money troubles when she was alive, but after she died, her estate was valued at over $50 million. In September 2018, Lee signed her last will, and her daughter, Anna Christina Tina Radziwill, was named the only beneficiary of her enormous wealth. In an unusual twist, Lee's will stipulated that her daughter would get 50% of the proceeds from her estate sale. It was unexpected that Lee, rather than her daughter, appointed two male acquaintances who were not known to be in her tight circle as her executors. Having been chosen as her executors, they were now eligible to receive substantial commissions, putting them in a highly favorable financial position. Many individuals were taken aback by the sudden distribution of Lee's secret multi-million-dollar bequest, which had remained undisclosed until her will was published. In her final act, the famous socialite ensured that her daughter, whom she had left behind, would receive all the attention after having spent her entire life in the First Lady's shadow. Despite leading an eventful life, this princess was frequently overshadowed by her sister. What are your thoughts on her? Let us know in the comment section below. Also be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this.